There are moments in every believer's life when heaven feels quiet, when prayers echo in the darkness and all we hear is silence. Joseph knew this silence. Forgotten by men, seemingly forsaken by God. And yet, the silence was not absence. In that stillness, God was shaping a future Joseph could not yet see. A redemption written in whispers. The same silence that breaks us also builds us. Genesis 40, 1-3 reads, "Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against the Lord, their king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined." Joseph has been wrongfully accused, in prison for doing what was right, resisting sin, honoring God, and yet his reward was chains. The dreamer who once wore a coat of many colors now wore shackles of iron. And for years, there's no word from heaven. This is where faith meets the silence of God. In Genesis 40, Joseph interprets the dreams of two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker. He tells the cupbearer, "Remember me when it is well with you." But the text ends with a haunting line. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Forgotten, abandoned, silenced. Every believer has stood in that space between promise and fulfillment, prayer and answer, faith and the long, empty waiting. We often mistake God's silence for his absence. But silence is not the same thing as stillness. Tim Keller once said, "God often works through apparent absence more than his presence." When God seems silent, he's often preparing something that could not be accomplished if he spoke too soon. R.C. Sproul once wrote, "God's delays are not his denials. They are his designs." Joseph's silence in prison was the waiting room for providence, a pause before purpose. 2 full years passed before the cupbearer remembered him. Yet, at the perfect moment, that memory opened the door to Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh said to them, "I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Centuries later, another faithful servant of God found himself in prison, not for wrongdoing, but for obedience. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was imprisoned by the Nazis for standing against tyranny and confessing Christ in a culture of compromise. In the silence of his cell, he wrote, "God is silent when he must be silent. that he may be heard in his speaking. Even when the gallows awaited him, Bonhoeffer held fast, declaring, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." Like Joseph, his faith was not proven in deliverance, but in devotion. Faith that endures even when heaven whispers. C.S. Lewis, too, wrestled with divine silence after the death of his beloved wife, Joy. In A Grief Observed, he wrote, "Where is God? Go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is in vain. And what do you find? A door slammed in your face, and the sound of bolting and double bolting on the other side." Lewis was not rebelling. He was recording the raw honesty of faith in crisis. And yet, later, he confessed, the silence of God was not a refusal to speak, but an invitation to listen. Many skeptics point to divine silence as evidence for God's non-existence. But silence does not disprove presence. It often refines it. As apologist Lee Strobel noted, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when God is working behind the veil of time. God's silence can be a test of trust, not a withdrawal of his love. When Joseph felt forgotten, he shared the same heartache that David expressed generations later. David cried out in Psalm 13, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" And yet, just a few verses later, David concludes, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation." Even in the silence, the song of faith continued. Joseph's story foreshadows Christ, the innocent one who was betrayed, condemned, and seemingly forgotten. Between the crucifixion and the resurrection, there was silence, a sealed tomb, a world without answers. And yet, in that silence, redemption was being written. Charles Spurgeon once said, "When you cannot trace his hand, you can trust his heart." The silence of God is not void. It's the shadow of his sovereign work. When prayers feel unanswered and your life feels forgotten, remember, the same God who remembered Joseph remembers you. Romans 8:28 reminds us. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Even when you can't see his hand, he's weaving the unseen threads of providence into purpose. Joseph's silence in prison wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And when the moment came, the same God who seemed silent spoke through circumstance, lifted Joseph out of the dungeon, and seated him in the palace. God's silence is never his absence. It is often the prelude to his greatest revelation. So when heaven feels quiet, when your prayers seem unanswered, when your soul aches in the waiting, remember Joseph, remember Bonhoeffer, remember Christ. The silence is not the end of the story. It's the space where God is still writing. May God keep you and bless you.